rational expressions and equations. Student made the following 4 statements regarding rational expressions. The values of the variable which result in the rational expression not being defined are non-permissible values. Is that true or false? True. That's true. The values of the variable which make the numerator equal to 0 are the restrictions on the variable. False. It's not the numerator, it's the denominator. Statement number 3, non-permissible values are known as the restrictions on the variable. That's true. And non-permissible values are values of the variable which make the denominator equal to 0. That's true. So the statement that is false is B. Question number 2, when simplified, the rational expression can be reduced to which of the following? So I need to simplify, or I need to factor the top. So 2 numbers that multiply to -2 and add to +1. 2 and -1. And what kind of expression do I have on the bottom? This binomial, what do we call it?
Difference of squares.
Difference of squares. And when I factor it, what do I get?
A plus 1, A minus 1.
So then the A minus 1s will cancel each other out, and I'll get A plus 2 over A plus 1, which is C. Question number 3, the reduced form of the following. So we have to factor this out. So if I look at factoring this, I'm going to be looking at something that multiplies in a sense to -15 and adds to a +2. So what multiplies to -15 and adds to a +2? 5 and 3. So when I put this in big brackets, so I'm going to get a 5 and y and a 3 and y if I keep it in this same form. To figure out where the y, or which one should be negative and which one should be positive, I want to get a positive 5y and a negative 3y. That'll give me my +2. And then on the bottom, when I go to factor this out, I can factor this out again by that sight method because I've got prime numbers here with the 3 and the 5. So the only way I'm going to get a 3y squared is to multiply 3y and y. And then to get my my 5 is going to be a 5 and a 1. I just need to figure out which one is the 5 and which one is the 1. So which one would be 5? Because then I would get a net, oh, that should be 3y minus 1 too. Because then I'll get a positive 5y, and there's my -1 and my -15. So these look very similar to being the same, but not quite. They're the opposite side. So if I took out a -1 and said that this simplifies to a -1, then what I would have is -3 minus y over 3y minus 1, which would be B. The other way that I could look at doing this question is I could take out a -1 in this step right here and rewrite it as y squared minus 2y minus 15. And then when I went to factor that, I would get a -1 times y minus 5 and y plus 3. So then the y minus 5s would cancel out, and I'd still be left with the same thing on the top, this -1 times y plus 3. Question number 4, the following expression can be reduced to what? So on the top, I have a quadratic. If I go to factor that quadratic, I'm looking for 2 numbers that multiply to 20 and add to 9. Four and 5. So this time it would be x plus 5y in order to get that y squared, and x plus 4y. And then if I look at the bottom, I have a binomial. So I check to see if it's a difference of squares, which it's not, and I check to see can I pull out a common factor. So what's common to both terms? X. So if I remove an x, I get x plus 5y, which cancels with the top, and I get x plus 4y over x, which is none of these three answers, so the answer ends up being D, none of the above. Question number 5, the following expression can be reduced to what? So if I look at this first one, this kind of gives me a hint as to what I'm going to have, this 3b and a 1. Whether it's a positive 1 or a negative 1, I have to figure that out. But I can use those multiple choice answers to kind of guide me in my factoring. The only way that I can get a 1 is to multiply 1 and 1. The only way I'm going to get a 9v if I already have 3v is to multiply it by another 3v. If this is positive and this is negative, these two have to be negative. Okay? And then if I look to try to factor the bottom out without trying to take a lot of time, without doing decomposition, again, if I look at my answers here, I have one of these 3v's minus 1 that is going to cancel out. So that has to be one of my factors. And so then I can work backwards. What do I multiply by 3v to get to 12v squared? I can multiply it by 4v. What would I multiply negative 1 by to get to positive 3? I can multiply it by negative 3. And then I can just double check that the middle term would equal negative 13. I'd have a negative 4 and a negative 9, which gives me negative 13. So these cancel, and my answer ends up being A. For question number 6, we are asked to find the restrictions on the variable in the division. So when we are asked to find restrictions on the variable, we look at the denominator. So we're going to look at x minus 2, which means x can't equal 2. We'll look at x minus 1, meaning x can't equal 1. But because this is a division statement, when I go to solve it, I multiply by the reciprocal. This will also become a denominator. So I can't have x equaling 3 either. Because if x equals 3, I get a 0 here, which would make this whole statement 0, and I can't divide by 0. So my two unknowns are 3 is x can't equal 1, 2, and 3. Okay, question number 7 also deals with non-permissible values. Consider the non-permissible values for the following addition statement. The product of the non-permissible values is what? So what do I need to do in order to solve this? Factor it. So if I factor 6y squared minus 7y minus 3, I could possibly use this sight method, because the only way that I'm going to get a 3 is to multiply 3 and 1. And then with my 6y, I can have 2 and 3, and I can have 6 and 1. So it might take some maneuvering or looking at mental math. But if I look at this has to be a negative 3, which means one of these is positive, one of these is negative. So I'd be finding the difference between the two. And looking at this, what stuck out? If this was 9, and then this was 2, the difference would be 7. So if I made this a 3y and this a 2y, there's my 6y squared, there's my 3, and to make it a negative 7, I can make this a negative 9 and a positive 2. And then if I look at the next one, 2y squared minus 15y plus 18. Again, because I have a prime number, the only way I can get a 2y squared is to multiply 2y and y. The middle term is negative and the last term is positive, which means these will both have to be minus. And then again, I have to try to figure out a combination of 18. 18 and 1 is not going to work because I'd have to add them together. 9 and 2 won't work because I'd have, or would they work? 9 and 2. If I went 9 here, I'd have 18, and 2 would be 20. If I went the other way, I'd have 4 and 9, which would be 13. So that brings me to 6 and 3. And if I put 6 here, I get 12. 3 more gives me my 15. So then if I look at what my non-permissible values are, the non-permissible in this one is negative 1/3. What's the non-permissible for 2y minus 3? 3/2, which is the same one for here, so I don't need to put it again. And y minus 6, the non-permissible would be 6. So then if I add these together, 6 plus 3/2 minus 1/3. Oh, right, sorry, product. So negative 1/3 times 3/2 times, we can put it as 6/1. So if you watch this, the 3's top and bottom will cancel each other out. 6 divided by 2 would be 3. And then I have this negative in the front, so negative 3 would be my product. Question number 8, a simplified form. In other words, add these two expressions. So in order to add rationals, what do I need? Common denominator. So what would my common denominator be?
X minus 3 times 3 plus x.
Okay, do I have to? What do you notice about these two terms?
We both have an x but 3.
They both have an x and a 3, and they're kind of backwards to each other, right? So if I rewrote this 2 over negative x plus 3, if I factored out a negative 1, I have the same denominator. So now my common denominator could be just x minus 3. The 4 would stay, and this negative 1, 2 divided by negative 1 is negative 2. So I get 4 minus 2, which is 2. My answer would be A. Okay? So you have to watch for these. When they have the same terms and they're just kind of inverted, chances are you can factor out a negative 1 and make them the same. Question number 9, if the difference between these two rationals can be written in the form of k over 3a, what is the value of k? So what's my common denominator? 3a. So the 8 wouldn't change, but what do I have to multiply the second rational by? 3. So I multiply the bottom by 3, multiply the top by 3, and what's 8 minus 6? 2. So I get another A value. Okay. If we look at numerical response number 1, when simplified, the difference between these two expressions can be written in the form of ax minus b over the bottom, and it needs you to find the values of what a, b, and c are, and then add them together. So in order to do this, I'm going to need a common denominator. Before I find a common denominator, I need to factor these at the bottom. So how do I factor x squared minus 49? plus 7 and x minus 7. And how do I factor x squared minus 5x minus 14?
X minus 7, x plus 2.
So now that I have my denominators factored, I can then look for a common denominator. What would my common denominator be?
X minus 7, x plus 7, x plus 2.
Yep. So we now know what C is. C is 7. Because it matches up with the stuff that's on the bottom. So now to find the top, what do I have to multiply the first term by to get that common denominator?
X plus 2.
So I take 4 and multiply it by x plus 2. And what do I have to multiply the negative 3 by?
X plus 7.
Okay, so when I multiply that, I get 4x plus 8 minus 3x minus 21. So 4x minus 3x is x. And 8 minus 21?
13.
So what's the value of A?
1.
1. And what's the value of B?
13.
13. Why did I write 15? Because I didn't hear you correctly? So B is 13. Not negative 13 because it's already got the minus sign in here. So if I cover up the minus sign, I get the B value of 13. So now if I add these three numbers together, what do I get?
21.
21. Isn't that blackjack?
Yep. We win.
We win. Woohoo! Okay, question number 10. How do I simplify this? What do I need?
First denominator is x minus 4 times x minus 4.
Okay, so I need to factor this denominator. So 6x over x minus 4 times x minus 4 minus 2 times x minus 4. Once I have my denominators factored, then I can look at my common denominator. X minus 4 times x minus 4. So that means that the first term doesn't change at all. And the second term, I'm going to have to multiply by an x minus 4. So I would get negative 2 times x minus 4, which gives me negative 2x. So 6x minus 2x is 4x. And then negative 2 times 4 would be positive 8. Right? And then I have 2 of the x minus 4s. So x minus 4 squared. And that corresponds to D. Okay, question number 11. Student determines the dimensions of the door to a conference hall can be written as rational expressions. Expressions for the length and the width of the door are shown. The area of the door to the conference hall can be expressed as a quadratic expression. The value of A plus B plus C is what? So, what do we need to do in order to solve this question? Say that again?
Multiply that.
So I have to multiply these two expressions together, and when I go to multiply them together, what will make it easier? factoring it. So if we take this one, this x squared plus 12x plus 35, and if I factor that, what do I get?
X plus 7, X plus 5.
Okay? And then when I go to factor this one, the only way that I can get a 2x squared is to multiply x by 2x. And then to get a 3, the only way I'm going to get a 3 is 3 times 1. I just need to figure out where the 3 goes and where the 1 goes. So to get 7 in the middle, I want this to be 6 and 1 because they're both positive. So now I can do my length times width. I can multiply them together. So x plus 7 times x plus 5 over 2x plus 1 times 2x plus 1 times x plus 3 over x plus 5. Because we're multiplying all of these terms together, order doesn't matter when I multiply, and I can also cancel. So if I can cancel, x plus 5 divided by x plus 5 would equal 1. 2x plus 1 and 2x plus 1 would also equal 1. So I have a denominator of 1, which I don't need to express anymore. And then I have x plus 7 times x plus 3. So I want to expand this to create the quadratic. So I would get x squared, a 3x and a 7x would give me a 10x. And 7 times 3 would give me 21. So a plus b plus c would be 1 plus 10 plus 21, which would equal 32. Okay. So a question like this makes it very hard to use your calculator to try to do a guess and check to find the answer, because the only way really that you can do it is to follow algebra so that you can find out this a, b, and c value. The product shown can be reduced to an integer n. What is the value of n? So this requires factoring in order to go through this. So if I look at 2x cubed minus 50x, what can I factor? 2x. And if I factor out a 2x, what am I left with? Well, what's x squared minus 25?
Difference of squares.
Difference of squares. So when I factor the difference of squares, I get x plus 5 and x minus 5. On the bottom, 5x squared minus 30x plus 25. What can I do here?
Factor out a 5.
Take out a 5, and what am I left with?
X squared minus 6x plus 5.
And if I factor this, two numbers will multiply to 5 and add to negative 6.
Negative 5.
So negative 5 and negative 1. Okay. What can I factor out of the top here? 5x. And what am I left with? 1 minus x. Okay. And what can I factor out of the bottom?
X squared.
And what am I left with?
X plus 5.
Okay. So if we start trying to cancel things out, x plus 5s will cancel out. The x minus 5s will cancel out. I have a 5 here and a 5 there. I have x and x, which would be an x squared. So that will cancel out. So now I'm left to this point. But this is not an integer. So what can I do? If I factor out a -1 from here, I'm going to get a -1 and a positive x. Now, I have another common term that can cancel out, leaving me with 2 times -1, which is -2, which is an integer. Okay, numerical response number 2. When divided, the following expression can be written in the form of ax plus b over cx plus d. So write the values of a, b, c, and d in the boxes. So in order to divide this, what will I need to do? I'm going to need to factor it. So 16x squared plus 8x plus 1. How would I factor that? Yeah, it's a perfect square. The 4x times 4x is 16, 1 times 1 is 1, and then 4x and the 4x gives me the 8x. Okay? Factor x squared plus 6x minus 27. So x plus 9 times x minus 3. Okay. And now we're going to actually do that flipping thing. So we're going to look at this first. The 2x squared minus x minus 15. If I factor that, the only way I can get a 2x squared is to multiply x and 2x. And then that -15, it's 15 and 1, which if I put them in these combinations, I'm not going to get a -1. So it has to be the 5 and the 3. It's a matter of figuring out where does the 5 go and where does the 3 go. Well, if I put the 3 to multiply with the 2, I get 6. And the difference with 6 and 5 gives me that 1. To get this as a -1, I make this a -3 and a positive 5. And then I've got 8x squared plus 22x plus 5. So if I go to factor this, without doing decomposition, take a look at the question. I know already that I can cancel this out. That gives me a hint right off the start. And chances are, with this 8x squared plus 22x plus 5, I'm going to be able to cancel out either the 4x plus 1 or the 2x plus 5, or possibly even both. But knowing that I should be able to cross out one of these should give me the hint that the 8x squared has to be 4x times 2x. And then that 5, again, that 5 could be on either end. 5 times 1. I just have to figure out whether or not the 5 goes here, which would give me 10, and the 1 would give me 4. So together would give me 14, or if I went the other way with the 5. So putting the 5 here would give me 20, and the 2 would then give me my 22. Which now gives me more things to cancel out. A 4x plus 1 and a 4x plus 1, a 2x plus 5 and a 2x plus 5. Which leaves me with this. So what's the value of A?
4.
And B is?
1.
C is?
1.
And D is?
9.
expression can be written as what? So this is a division question of two terms. This term divided by this one. So if I divide, first of all, what should I do with the 1 over a squared minus 36? Factor it. And what do I get when I factor it?
A plus 6, A minus 6.
And then this would be divided by 1 over a minus 6, which how do I divide?
What? Multiply.
So I get a minus 6 over 1. So the a minus 6's would cancel, and I'm left with 1 over a plus 6. Okay, question 14. The simplified form of the following expression is what? What do I need to do with this? Yeah. I need to actually combine these in the brackets. So in order to do this, I need a common denominator. So what's my common denominator in the first expression? X. So the negative 2 would stay as it is, but I'd have to multiply 6 by x. So I would get 6x minus 2. And then my common denominator for the next expression would be x squared. So then I'd have to multiply the 9. So I get 9x squared minus 1. So if I go to multiply, the x squared will come up to the top. And what should I do with the 9x squared minus 1? Difference of squares. Okay, and the x goes to the top on this side. And what should I do with that 6x minus 2? Take out a 2, and, oh, not sure why I did that. There we go. And I get a 3x minus 1. So now if I start canceling out like terms, 3x minus 1 and 3x minus 1, one of these x's will cancel out one of those. So then on the bottom, I have 3x plus 1, and on the top, I have 2x, which would be the same as b. Because 1 plus 3x is the same as 3x plus 1. Numerical response number 3. Two numbers differ by 3. And their quotient is 3/4. The larger number is what? So I have to think of this as in a problem-solving way. So I can let x be the smaller number, or I can let it be the larger number. It doesn't matter. Pick one. Smaller? So if x is the smaller number, what do you know about the relationship between the smaller number and the larger number? They differ by 3, so the larger has to be 3 more. Okay? Their quotient is 3/4. In order to get 3/4, do I go smaller divided by larger or larger divided by smaller? The smaller divided by the larger. So there's my equation. How do I solve this type of equation? Cross multiply, because I only have one term on each side. So I get x times 4, which would be 4x. And 3 times x plus 3 would be 3x plus 9. Minus 3 on each side, or yeah, minus 3x on each side. and x would equal 9. Is that my answer? No, because 9 is the smaller number. So what's the larger number?
12.
12. And if you had let x be your larger number, your smaller number would have been x minus 3. And it still would have worked out. In that case, you would have gotten that x equals 12 instead. Question number 15. In solving the rational equation, an equation which appears is what? So, how would I solve this equation? I wouldn't do a common denominator.
You just cross multiply.
I'd cross multiply. I'd move this to the other side and rewrite it as 4x over 3x plus 4 equals 10 over x plus 6. And then I would cross multiply. So 4x times x plus 6 is 4x squared plus 24x. And then 10 times 3x plus 4 becomes 30x plus 40. And then I bring everything over to one side, so I keep my 4x squared positive. Bring the 30x over, it'll become negative. When I combine it with the 24, I get a negative 6x. Bring the 40 over, and it also becomes negative, which gives me b. The formula. You guys recognize the formula? 1 over r equals 1 over r1 plus 1 over r2. It concerns resistance in an electrical circuit, and it's used in physics. If r is equal to 3 and r1 is equal to, and r1 is 8 ohms more than r2, what is the value of r1? So I don't know what R1 and R2 are, so I can assign values to them. R1 is 8 ohms more than R2. So if R1 is equal to X, what would R2 be equal to? X minus 8. So then I have 1 over 3. Because r is equal to 3, equals 1 over x plus 1 over x minus 8. So how would I solve this? What do I want to do to solve this question? I want to get rid of the denominators. So I multiply by my common denominator, which, unless there are common factors, is going to be the product of my 3 denominators. There is no common factor, so I'd multiply by 3x times x minus 8. So when I multiply 1/3 by this common denominator, the 3's would cancel, and I'd be left with x times x minus 8. When I multiply the 1 over x, the x's would cancel, and I'd be left with 3 times x minus 8. And in the last one, the x minus 8's cancel, and I have 3x. Remove my brackets. And then bring everything over to one side. So the two 3x's would become 6x. Bring it over would be a negative, so I now have a negative 14x. Bring the 24 over, and it becomes positive. If I factor this quadratic, I need two numbers that multiply to 24 and add to negative 14. What would I get? Okay. So I get that x equals 2 and x equals 12. But I can't have two values for R1. Either R1 is equal to 2 or it's equal to 12. Which one is it? Why 12? Because when I put it into R2, I get a value. I get 4 ohms. If I put this into R2, I get 2 minus 8, which is negative 6. I can't have a negative ohm value. Either I have an ohm or I don't. So R1 has to be equal to 12. Okay. Question number 5. Govinda has a cardiovascular routine where he walks for 3 kilometers, runs for 7.5, and then walks for an additional 4. He runs 2.5 times as fast as he walks, and the total time taken for his routine is 2 hours. His walking speed to the nearest tenth is what? So this is a distance, speed, and time. So I find it easier to set it up as a chart. Distance, speed, and time. And I am walking and I am running. So walk and run. How far does he walk? 7 kilometers. 3 and then another 4. How far does he run? 7.5. Do I know how fast he walks or runs? So if I don't know their speed, that's where I can assign the value. And I'll let the slower one be x, and he runs 2.5 times faster, so 2.5 times x. And what's the relationship between distance, speed, and time? Time would be the distance divided by the speed. So I'd have 7 divided by x, and 7 divided by 2.5x. And what's 7.5 divided by 2.5? 3. So this I could rewrite as 3 over x, and then I get rid of the decimals. And what else do I know? Takes 2 hours. So the time spent walking plus the time spent running would equal 2 hours. So how do I get rid of this denominator, or sorry, before we do that, if the denominators are the same, I can add them. So what do I get? I would get 10 over x equals 2. And answer the question, 10 divided by what equals 2? So 10 divided by 5 equals 2, so the answer for walking speed would be 5 kilometers per hour. Last question, written response. A plane flew from Red Deer to Winnipeg, which has a flying distance of 1,260 kilometers. On the return journey, due to a strong headwind, the plane traveled 1,200 kilometers in the same time it took to complete the outward journey. On the outward journey, the plane was able to maintain an average speed of 20 kilometers per hour greater than on the return. If the average speed of the plane from Red Deer to Winnipeg is x kilometers per hour, what would be the average speed from Winnipeg to Red Deer? So outward means from Red Deer to Winnipeg. That's my x. And on the outward journey, the plane was 20 kilometers greater than on the return. So in other words, if the speed is 100 kilometers per hour going there, what was it coming back? 80, because the outward was 20 kilometers greater than the return. So if this is x, the return journey would be x minus 20 kilometers per hour. So then you're asked to calculate the average speed. So again, this is going to be a distance, speed, and time graph, or time chart. And we have Red Deer to Winnipeg. And then we have Winnipeg to Red Deer. Okay. What distance was traveled on the Red Deer to Winnipeg route? That a different color. And what distance was traveled Winnipeg to Red Deer? 1,200. That's the distance that was given. The speeds, Red Deer to Winnipeg was x, and x minus 20 was the return. And then the relationship with distance, speed, and time is distance divided by speed. And what am I given for a relationship in my time? So in the previous question, I was told that the total time equaled 2 hours. What am I told about the time in this question? It's the same. So the time it took to travel this distance is equal to the time it took to travel this distance. So the times will be equal to each other. So how would I solve a question like this? I would cross multiply. So I get 1260 times x minus 20 and 1200 times x. So if I remove the brackets, I get 1260x minus 1260 times 20 ends up being what?
24,000.
Not 24, it's 1260, not 1200. It would be 25,200. Does that make more sense now?
Yeah.
So at this point, what I would do is I'd put the 25,200 on this side to make it positive, and I'd bring the 1200x over to the other side, which would make it negative, and then when I combine it with the 1260, I get 60x. Divide both sides by 60, and x equals 420. So that's the speed from Red Deer to Winnipeg. So the speed from Winnipeg to Red Deer would be 420 minus 20, which would be 400 kilometers per hour. And if I went 1200 divided by 400, I get 3 hours. And if I go 1260 divided by 420, I also get 3 hours. And the times were equal to each other. So that's my check. Question 3 says, calculate the total flying time for the round trip. So from Red Deer to Winnipeg, the plane has to fly a distance of 1260. That's the distance between the two cities. On this trip, the plane is flying at 420 kilometers per hour. So that gives me 3 hours. On the way back, this time it's the 1260. It's the total distance that it would take to get to Red Deer. The 1200 does not actually get me to Red Deer. So I need to go that 1260. And this time I'm traveling 400 kilometers per hour. So it is going to take me more time. What I get is 3.15 hours. And if I change this 0.15 into minutes, I would go 0.15 times 60. And what is 0.15 times 60? So I get 3 hours and 9 minutes. So the total flying time would be 6 hours and 9 minutes for the trip.